to say that we haven't made any progression. But it's a harsh reality that we're facing.
One of the things I think that it continues to talk about, and we'll move right in and while people come in into the show and talk. I think what are some of the things, Mr. Watkins, that you've seen? Like, and again, most if people are just now tuning in and listening to us, you graduated college in '62, so you grew up in Virginia around the '40s. Is that
Oh
about
yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
So we just only know from the history books what the '40s were like for a person of color. But what is has things dramatically changed from what you saw in the '40s to what you see in 2020? Is there anything that's been like, it has made a great movement and a great change? Because when we talk about Black history, we want to talk about stuff that has moved the needle. And if we're not talking about the stuff being moved and no needles being moved, then we're still living in the past, technically.
Well, considering that what we had to go through in terms of early schooling, for instance, all grades were taught in one school building, and you had to walk about 2 miles and either or more, maybe almost 3 miles, really, to go to school, no matter what the weather was. As I said, everybody's being taught in this one little school building. In my early years of school, um, you look and see the white kids, they were riding buses to go to school. We were walking. Um, but the plus of that, if you want to call it a plus, was that the teachers, they were dedicated so much so that they wanted you to learn. They wanted you to excel. And they did the best that they could do, even though you hand-me-down books, some of them raggedy, some of them outdated, most of them outdated.
Mhm.
Uh, but all in all, when you put it all together and you say to yourself, we survived, I like to say, we kind of conquered those deficiencies, and I think that's what made us stronger. And that's why I just believe that we have been able to this day, as the youth went by, as time went by, we were always able to to, to find a way to make a to make it. Our survival skills is unreal. If you think about it, I mean, you think about it, from where we came from slavery in 150 some years, and here we are, where everywhere. I mean, we're in every phase and facet of government, to education, to medicine, to lawyers. I mean, that's amazing if you can think about that. And the thing is that we have got to somehow or another get that over to our young kids. That's why I believe that Black history is so important, because if they don't know where they're coming from, how do they know where they, they've got to have a strong root of,
But what here, you know, Kelly Little, thank you for coming in, my brother. We were talking about Mr. Watkins. He graduated college in 1962, so I was asking him about living in Virginia in 1940s, and we were talking about the needle being moved from that to here. But the problem I'm still stuck on. We're everywhere, but we haven't moved a needle on anything. We may be lawyers, we may be doctors, we may be a lot of things, but it's still like we haven't pushed any boulder forward. And that seems to be stuck in my craw.
So I don't know. I think I don't know. Maybe, just maybe, that uh, we haven't given ourselves the due, and our children sometimes I think we may have not made them aware
Of what?
of our responsibilities. And because of that, any little thing becomes a crisis for them. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
Does that make because I know friends of mine that children walking around with credit cards, their own credit cards, 7 years old. You know what I'm saying? They can go into a store. I mean, it's you know, and I guess I'm the dinosaur, so to speak, because.
But we're listening.
But I had to see when I came in school, no matter what was going on in school and how far I had to walk, what the weather was, I still had chores when I got home.
I don't think, Malik, I mean, you're one of our soldiers. Do you think we're raising soft children?
You know what? I wouldn't say that. Here's what I will say. Right? We got to raise kids for the world of today. So you can't raise kids the way you were raised because they're not living in that same world. Right? I was telling somebody today, actually, that there was a young man that had some technology I wasn't aware of. Right? And I was saying, I'm not really trying to learn that because that doesn't apply to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like my grandmother who doesn't have no emails. She's not interested in being on Facebook. She don't know what a tweet is. You know what I'm saying? She's not texting nobody. She's not taking photos with her phone, right? She's living in a certain time and she's comfortable with that, right? So I need to raise my kids for this world and the world that they're going to inherit, right? So they don't need to be super tough because hopefully they're not inheriting that world. Like I grew up in Brooklyn, right? And lived in like Cape Charles, Virginia and places like that. So there was like an element of toughness that you needed just to survive like the crack era, like the crack era 80s, right? My kids don't have that experience. So I need to equip them with the skills to navigate this world and the future world that they're going to take over. And they don't need that machismo, that rah-rah stuff, because they don't need those skills.
But does that mean they still don't? Go ahead.
No,
Malik, my man, 50 grand. I'm going to disagree and gently push back. And I'm going to tell you why. I agree that we had to prepare for a different world. But I heard an elder tell me one time, his father had to walk 10 miles to get some of the things that he needed to get. And then he had to walk 5 miles to get some of the things he needed. And then after that, that son had to walk 2 miles, but his children only have to drive a Mercedes. And then the generation after him, they might be driving in a Bentley. But what's going to happen is because each generation have been gifted a little more, and the late great ancestor Frederick Douglass said there can be no progress without a struggle.
Yes.
So you return back to walking 5 miles because their ability to adapt to certain circumstances and situations, because as parents, sometimes we want our kids to be better than us. And so we take some of that struggle away from them. Almost like when the chicken is get ready to hatch. If you crack the shell, we ruined that chicken for the rest of his life. So that's just a gentle pushback. I do agree with you around adopting our parenting styles to the current condition we're in. But so many parents want to give their children anything, and heaven forbid my child or somebody else's child does something wrong and somebody correct them. When we grew up, I know for me in Philadelphia, I did something wrong, I'm gonna catch it for like 3 neighborhoods, right?
Right.
And I just think talking to kids in training schools and in prison, the one element that they've told me was missing was adults holding them accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's out their mouth, not, not my opinion. So
listen, I agree with you, but I think we're saying 2 different things. And actually, a lot of it, we agree on this. So the kids who don't have guidance, they're going to need guidance. So I feel like you're talking about community. We need that sense of community that we had, when we were growing up. It's kind of, drifted away. We don't really have that anymore, right? But on the other hand, right, you always stand on the shoulders of the people who came before you.
Right.
Right. So my life should be better than my parents' life because they laid a foundation. My children's life should be better than my life because we build on top of that foundation that's been laid. Right. So financial literacy. My parents didn't really teach me that because they were working class parents, right? Mothers, school teacher, guidance counselor, fathers in education, the same thing, right? They didn't really learn those financial literacy, lessons, but they made sure that it was instilled in me. So now I can have a conversation with my daughter at 18, 19, like, yo, make sure you get whole life insurance. Make sure you invest in stock, invest in Bitcoin. All those conversations that my parents will be uncomfortable with. They know about working, saving for retirement. They didn't really know about investing in stock. So that's what I'm talking about. They need a different skill set. Right. Now, in terms of being tough and all of that, they need to be more mentally tough now. That's what I'm talking about. They need to, and me, where I needed to really survive my environment, they got a totally different environment. So I can't train them what I needed, the skills I needed, because those skills are now obsolete for this new technology, this new world. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's where I was agreeing with you. I was saying some things we saying the same. If you listen to, it's interesting you brought up financial literacy, right? Warren Buffett said that he doesn't give his family anything to do with money because if he do, they'll never learn how to navigate that space for themselves. So he makes them earn it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Which is tied to the mental component, but even some of the small physical things. So a lot of things you're right, we are saying that's the same. But man, I watched even in the military, Dr. Dyer, I know you know this, Brother McCarter knows it too. They talking about stress cards.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, these are kids that's fighting for our country. Yeah, that's I can throw a stress card and the drill sergeant has to back away.
Yeah. Hey, Kelly, it's funny you touched on that. I had a discussion about that. I was like, if you in the theater of war, you ain't got time to pull this card out and say, y'all stop shooting. I'm stressed out right now. You know what I'm saying? And that's, that's the thing that, and I agree with both of you guys. It's like our kids, we have to teach them to our environment now. Now, us right here, we learn, we progress, we educating ourselves. But it's a whole other world out there that's not doing what we did. So those are the ones that's still in the street, grew up like you grew up, Malik, grew up like you grew up, Kelly, in those cities. I didn't grow up in the city. I visited the city in DC in the mid-'80s. It was rough. I seen my first person get shot at 8 years old. You know what I'm saying? My kids never experienced that.
And that should make us feel kind of proud.
My kids never experienced that. However, they experienced the opposite of that. They experienced a kid in middle school commit suicide.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So
right.
It's like it's the two, the two evils. We didn't see that firsthand, but then they see a kid commit suicide in middle school. I never experienced that. You know what I'm saying? Because it was more like everything was just like, hey, whatever you get, be appreciative of. this day and time, it's like it's never enough.
Kelly, you have mentioned something about Warren Buffett, and let me ask you guys this: LeBron James gives his money to Warren Buffett to control his investments. Now, we're supposed to support Black community and Black leadership and Black business. Why do we have one of those guys giving money to a white guy to invest his money? Now, is there something wrong with that, or are you guys okay with that?
Personally, I'm okay with it, simply because he does so much in the African American community.
He does.
And this has allowed him, why not take advantage? I know some will have a different opinion, and I can understand that too. But here is a known giver, a known winner, a known individual. On top of that, there's a lot to learn from him other than just about his financial aspect, but from his life, how he lives his life and how he deals with his children. So if you read articles or news or books about him, you can understand why LeBron had chosen him. And on another note, look how many of our special hour athletes who have chosen others, including some of our Black financial planners, and have lost their livelihood simply because they were crooks. So I think there's two sides to the coin here. I mean, but I personally have no griefs about LeBron making his investments with Buffett.
Hey, you know what I would say? Access is a gift, right? And if someone like LeBron James has access to Warren Buffett, take advantage of that, because whatever lessons he learns there, he can now bring back to his circle and his community. I mean, listen, LeBron and his story is a great testament to us in our community. Like, yeah, we see his athletic prowess, right? But look at his circle of friends that kind of came up with him and everything that they're doing, from the Rich Pauls to the Maverick Carter. You know, he got his man who still follows him to every team, you know, like, and all the businesses and all the people that they've employed because of that access. So I don't have a problem with that, because I see the good seeds that he's planting in our community.
Absolutely.
And I was going to kind of say the same thing, Malik, because the way I look at it, so LeBron is playing chess, as opposed to playing checkers. Right? Because when you elevate to a certain level, right, he did it in athletics. He gives back, so he knows community.
He does.
But what he don't know is he don't know how to make that money matriculate at the same rate as a Warren Buffett. So having that access and being able to have conversation and dialogue is what we should be talking about. Often we hear ourselves talking about intergenerationality.
Yes.
And we're talking about generational poverty.
Yes.
But if you're having access to a Warren Buffett,
do you take it?
Talking about
exactly
multi-generational wealth. You know what I mean? So that's the piece I like about it. Malik summed it up perfectly.
Because I
think
I
that's
know,
very well said, brother.
You know, I have, whether you could say taken advantage of or been privied or privileged or honored to be able to have friends and friends of many areas of races and stuff. And they're able to teach me. And that's how I look at it, whether it be talk to me, love me, you know, befriend me. But I look at it as also a lesson. Like I learn from you guys every time we talk, I learn. So that's an honor for me. I was talking to Mr. Watkins earlier, and I just don't think young Black men are trying to learn more to open their minds. It's like we got to force it on them so they could say, oh, yeah, I guess that's important. But we're like, yes, it is important. It is important. And they're not reading enough. I always find that to be odd. It's just so strange to me that young Black boys don't read. They read less than Black women and so on and so on. So it's scary. And the education system is also what's separating in. So.
Hey, one question, Dr. Doc, because one thing I've noticed in working with particularly young Black boys and even some men is that a lot of times we've been socialized to really make our young Black males to operate very differently than the way we should be encouraging them, right? You did this wrong. We don't lift them up and we don't affirm them like historically our grandparents affirm their kids. And it's not that we are just providers and protectors. We operate from a space of nurturing, education, but the piece that's missing is the listening. Like you brilliant brothers here are different than some other guy. Oh, they need to do this. They not doing it right. Well, this is how they did in the civil rights. At least we not forgetting on the civil rights movement, those guys were like 20-something years old.
Yeah, right.
So,
True.
but every generation seems to forget about what it was like during their march. And so for me, engaging and operating with them, I always humbly position myself to explain those faults that I had and the bad choices and bad decisions I made at an early age that benefited me and what the elders did to help elevate me. And so I'm trying to position myself not to judge you, but help you to not make some of the mistakes I made and then encourage you because I'm gonna let you fall some, because once you fall and are able to get up, then you realize that falling is not failing. It's just providing you the opportunity to learn and know not to make that mistake again.
Very well said. Very well said.
Kelly the man. Listen, here's what I also would add. I think young men and young Black men in our community, they're suffering from a lack of guidance. And some of it, and a majority of it, is not really their fault, right? So I think it's up to us to be available, because they're gonna look for that guidance at some point. We gotta be available when they do, right? And we've all been there. You go through this period in life where you're super machismo and you think you can figure it out. Then it gets to a point when you bump your heads a couple of times and you're looking around for guidance.
Yeah.
And we can't be judgmental. We got to kind of be open and say, okay, listen, I'm here for mentorship, when you're open to it.
Hey guys, I got a question for you guys. And this is the thing I've been pondering on. We've been devalued so much in our communities. Like you said, we've been lifting each other up. But how can we get the others, like we have this conversation within ourselves. So how can we get the others to see their value within themselves and start educating themselves? That's the issue that I'm trying to come up with, trying to address, trying to, reach out and just figure that out. And it's like the $1 million question, because we've been devalued so much over history, over time. Like you said, we're not reading, we're not going to get education. We just feel like we're nobody, is in a sense, because like you said, it's like our value has just totally dropped, like the market. You know what I'm saying? And so where do we start? That's the question for you guys.
So Charlemagne, great question. And this is Wes. This week we had talked about emasculation of Black men, and we are not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable enough to talk about what we believe we are not, or is, or isn't. We're just not allowing ourselves to be completely open so we can be taught. And that goes back to what Malik is saying. We're willing to be there for you, but whether it be myself or anything, if I don't open myself up completely to be vulnerable, to be saying, Paul, you're wrong, and you got it all twisted. You're not doing this, and this. And if that's if we can't do that as young boys, men, then we're going to stay in broken relationships, broken job opportunities. We're not going to be successful in our business because we'll be closed-minded to see opportunities. Wes, did I hit that enough?
Yeah, you did. And I'll take it a step further, as far as in the aspect of being vulnerable, just like, when we're dealing with young, impressionable young boys, young men, those type of things, we have to allow them to go ahead and just get it out of their system, just to talk uninterrupted in that aspect, to just kind of have it all pour out. And then we start to respond, because one of the things is, just like in our community, you'll find Black men or even Black boys, they're not going to seek that help. They're going to just internalize it and just carry it around with them like a weight on their neck and those type of things. But one of the things is, that first part of healing is just allowing them just to talk, just get it all out. And then once it's all out of their system, it's probably going to be pretty refreshing to them. It's like a cleansing in that aspect. It's like a weight has been lifted off them. They're able to literally tell someone, about what's going on. And then we start to go ahead and tackle that problem, right then and there.
One of the things that I had this seminar some years ago, well, a couple of seminars on listening. Now, some people say, oh, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it makes more sense than you think, because when you're listening, you learn and you find out what that individual, whether it be a young man or an adult or whomever, what they're all about, because you understand and you put in value to what they have to say. You're giving them value.
But Charlemagne, I think if we haven't answered your question, like, so how do we bring back value to the Black men when we're being devalued?
Right.
So you have to, I think sharply, if you're talking to that boy who says, I feel devalued, I think my immediate response is that you have to open up to be vulnerable and let all that pain out so we can regrow you.
Right.
And that seems like it doesn't seem like it's kind of almost feels like counterproductive. And if I feel devalued, back to Malik says, I should be more machismo about it. Like, well, I'm going to take what's mine, but you don't know what's yours because you don't know who you are.
Hey, you know what? So here's what I think about when you said that. Like, change is a process, it's not an event. All right. So with that being said, there's this parable in the Bible that talks about reaping and sowing. So you throw the seeds down, and sometimes the earth is hard, so the seed's not going to take. Right. And sometimes the seed takes, but then a crow will come along or a weed and like kill it, take it out.
Right.
Some seeds actually develop and it grows into an experience. So I think as Black men, especially at our level, telling our story is planting that seed, putting it out there. And once people hear your story, because they only see like where you are right now, they don't understand like the process that got you to that point, right? And if they can see themselves in that, that's that seed that's being planted, and whether it's directly they come up to you, they want you to mentor them, or whether it's just they hold on to it and say, yo, if he did it, I can do it.
Yep.
I know growing up for me, like besides my father, reading autobiographies was really like helpful to me. Richard Lewis, like all these Black successful men, to hear their stories and see the pattern in their stories was beneficial to me, because it was like whatever you can see, whatever you've been exposed to, you can grow to.
Yep.
Right. So you've been exposed to this story. It's like, oh, it's possible. I can do that. So I think all of us do that in our communities. We tell our stories. We're that model. We're this directly or indirectly.
During the school year, under normal circumstances, they always have what they call career days, right?
Mhm.
And when you go into the schools now, as opposed to when I was going to school back in those days, the dominant teachers were male, and and then you had a mixture of male and female, right? But now when you go into a school like for career day, you have young people, because there's such a limited number of males, Black, especially in the Black community, there's such a limited number of Black males in a school. When you walk in, oftentimes young African American children, males, will often start calling you, identifying you as, "That's my dad, that's my dad, that's my dad." Why do you think that is?
Mm.
Now, I mean, I'm giving it to you because that's what we are. They are so lacking in the male figure, especially in a positive male figure in their homes, in their environment, many of them, that they just want to be identified. They want to be identified with someone that they see, because I'm walking in with a suit and tie on, they think, oh, wow, he's the greatest thing out since popcorn. Whereas that imagery that we project as African American male, for some of us in the more affluent community, it may not matter.
Right.
In the lesser communities where their environments are totally different, it matters significantly.
And being from New York and Brooklyn, Malik, you don't drive as much in Brooklyn, do you? Much at all?
I drive all the time.
You do drive a lot. You
What?
you don't take mass trans?
Nah, not at all. I can't tell you the last time I was on mass transportation.
So my question is it's hard for young Black people to see us, Black males to see us, if we're always driving, going by them at 40, 50 miles an hour. I don't know how they will see us so they can visually go, man, look at that brother. When could they see us? If it's not in school, when could they see us?
Let me just say this, right? So what I do is I do grad products. So I'm in schools all the time.
Okay.
Right? That's what my company does. So,
Yeah.
Right. So I'm interacting with young Black men all the time. It's funny. Today we did this senior photos, right? So there was this young man who came in, right, with a tag hanging from his shirt, right? And I noticed it, and I was like, all right, cool. I saw it, but I didn't pay too much attention to it. Then there was another young man who had a similar shirt, tag hanging from his shirt. So I asked the advisor, I was like, yo, what is that? That's the second dude I seen with this. And they were like, yo, it's a brand. Off-White is the brand, right? And the shirt was probably $250. It was a $250 hoodie, Off-White.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I'm confused already.
Exactly.
I'm already shaking my head.
Right?
I'm confused.
Exactly. So I'm engaging with the young man. So then I'm like, yo, he wanted to take his photos. He had the Off-White hoodie on, right? He had the Fendi hat and a Fendi bag, right? Wow. You know, the bag that goes across your chest?
Yeah, right.
I don't know what jeans he had on. And he had this jacket. And I'm like, yo, between you and I, how much are you walking around on? How much is that whole outfit worth? Right? He was like, easily $1,500. Right? Yeah. And this is a teenager, right? Senior in high school. So what I say to him is, I was like, yo, you know what you could do with that $1,500? I was like, yo, if you invested in Bitcoin right now, it's probably gone up like 30%. Right? I was like, yo, and like that was just my way of like mentoring, planting that seed. And
I know.
but that's our young people, and it wasn't like a judgmental, place. And
No.
but listen, as like I'm 50 years old, as an older black male, that's the one thing like you can't be judgmental because you kind of said it earlier. Our young people are more sensitive than they used to be. I call them sensitive thugs. They the sensitive thugs. On that exterior, they real hard, but whatever you say, they holding on to it. And then they gotta show that, you disrespectful me, right?
Yeah.
You disrespectful, right? So there's a way we have to interact as well, with our young black men.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how you're in the schools. They need to see us. They are broken and traumatized. They're emasculated and devalued, and yet they still want to be thug about it. I don't know how that doesn't sound like a good meal to eat.
Listen, there's a rise in gang activity, right?
Right.
And
I read that.
Yeah, but it also goes back to like the broken home, right? Young men are looking for family. They looking to belong to something. And believe it or not, right? They're gonna get that sense of family, that sense of belonging, that
In the
sense of
gang.
structure and discipline in a gang. And they're looking for that. Somebody who has their back, they got their back.
Right.
And we know it's corrupted, right? The whole thing is corrupted. And it's like, listen, I always get into this, but it's designed that way.
It's supposed to be corrupted.
Right? No, it's designed that way, right? Where it's like, yo, I will take you at your lowest. Whatever society looks at as like a bad thing, we embrace that, right? You bring your leadership to us, right? And we'll enhance it. Something like the army, right?
Right.
You bring whatever you got and we'll shape it, right? So there is a need, right, for us and our structure and like what we've accomplished. We just like there's a time and opportunity that we're kind of missing out on.
And I still think we're missing out on it because we're not showcasing that they could come to us other than the gang. Like we're not in their face enough. We're not walking down the streets enough because maybe we're too busy going to our gig. We're too busy heading to our job. We're too busy paying our electric bill. But they're not. They're hanging out, and we're not hanging out. And how does young black males or how does black males say I can be if they never see? Like this picture behind me, what they see there be. But if they never see us, how can they be us? And we're like, well, we invite them. Well, we asked them to come to our powwow. We asked them to come to our community centers. Man, they ain't going.
Well,
Doc?
I think, Doc, that one of the things that we all must take in consideration is that when you're coming from some of the environments that some of our young males are coming from, their experiences are so traumatic. And I'll give you just an example of that. There's a school right next to our office building, the 100 Black Men's office building. And I was at this school, and I was reading to a class, and I was talking about black cowboys in the West. Okay. So, of course, gun comes into play as a part of the conversation. This young kid, and this is a third grade class, and so he raised his hand and he said, "Mr. Watkins," he says, "I know all about guns." He says, I said, "You do?" I said, "Well, that's how, I don't know how you know about it." I says, "But we're going to continue on." He says, "My sister, who was 6 years old, got killed sitting at our dinner table. And this guy was waving this gun. And
that struck me. I didn't know what, I was really dumbfounded here because I don't want this discussion to go down this particular road.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, there's 3 or 4 other hands. They are also talking about their experiences as it relates to guns. Okay. And what has happened to their family member. Most time, though, it was the younger children that were involved. Now, you think about that. I was so far removed from that, I had to think about it and to try to steer this class, this group of children back to what we were talking about, famous African Americans in the West, from the West. But it devastated me to know this young man being traumatized, and our children, whether we accept it or don't understand it, or we ignoring it or whatever, I don't think there is enough attention being placed upon our young people on how much they are so traumatized and how it affects their learning and how they have no one to really talk to about this. In depth. People who have those kinds of skills.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so the challenge for us seems to be is that we have to take on a more developed listening skills and not just sometimes, brush these young people off trying to understand it, because usually, even though they may use flavorful language or whatever, it's because that's what they know.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they know. And we just have to find out, figure out, sort out, whatever, so that we can meet them, so that we can understand where they're coming from, understand what their plights are.
I don't know if that still solves the problem. How do we get to them, Kelly?
So let me say something, because I think Elder Watkins was on to something, right? I think I know for a fact, just with the ones I've worked with, and that's North Carolina, some back in Philadelphia, and even out in Detroit, right? One of the things we have to remember when we're trying to help young people, and I'm not speaking to us in this spirit, but I've seen too many people who want to come from a corporate space, come into that place, give them a plan, didn't help them, didn't allow them to co-create their own plan. So we're telling them what they should do because this is the return on investment they're going to get with it, when that's not their purpose, right?
Right.
So let me back up a second. Malik talked about planting the seed. I think that's absolutely critical. And to his point, those who cultivate the soil are going to be the elders and the adults and those who listen to them. So now we got a seed, we have water, we have lime, whatever it is we need, and that cultivation of soil is going to be what that child needs. It's not going to be like Malik was talking about earlier, the time shift and change. And so we can't be stuck in the past with how we navigated the process or how we made it and like how we made it by ourselves. We have to be honest with young people and be truthful that everybody needs somebody to help them make it somewhere. So Doc, to your point, a big part of the solution really lies in when you treat children, you treat a family.
Right.
Because I only spend 6 hours, 8 hours with that young person, but then they go back somewhere else for another 16 hours in an environment that, as Elder Watkins said, is this. It is trauma. It is death. It's disparity. It's hopelessness. And so we got anxiety, we got grief, we got depression. So I chose to approach it from a sense. When I talk with young people, we do healing circles.
Yeah.
From the beginning of it, they don't even know what they're going through because I don't tell them. You break it down so it's simple, and they're sharing And the late great sister Maya Angelou said, people forget what you say, they forget what you do, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Right.
So as you operate from that space, like, and being consistent, because what happens all too often, people go in there for a period of time and then they disappear. So now we just re-traumatize them to everybody who walked out of their life in the past.
You know, Malik had said about autobiographies, how it helped him. Do you think Black history is helping?
I think it is, but I think it's only 1 month. I think it should be Black History 365. And again, that where if we elicit people from the community to consistently stay in their lives, then we can consistently pass down that narrative, not just the normal people that we talk about during Black History Month. We need to talk about that light filament, or when I'm in a car and I'm driving, understanding that traffic light was built by somebody, open heart surgery, like all these things that our young people don't know.
Me and my wife had talked about a synopsis for a book, and tell me what you think. We talked about when they leave, right? If Black people left, like completely disappeared from the planet, like some type of twilight zone, and when they leave, everything that a Black person has touched and made and developed, it would leave too. You would then know the effects of what the Black community had, and then they would know.
Yeah.
So
that would make for a great science fiction story.
Right.
But Doc, you know what? You saying something that's, if you think about it, when they had the exodus from the South, and all those people, the slaves and freedmen who left the South, when they had the major exodus, it left a big hole because they took all that knowledge with them. I mean, it was, they had a rough time. Well, who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? I mean,
who's going to feed our babies?
Yeah. I mean, all of it. All of it. It covered the whole gauntlet. It didn't make any difference. It didn't make any difference because we were so involved in that community, in those communities. And I think to this day, there was a certain amount of hate that was created.
Thank you.
Because
of it.
We knew, and they did know, and they were too, what do you want to call it? I don't know the word I want to use, but they didn't want to ask. You know, they didn't want to ask, will you teach me how to do this?
Right.
And you think about that. You just think about that for a moment. And I think one of the things that creative mind is something to be cherished. And Black folk, we have just been there. We've done that. We have been able to rise above all the problems, the lynchings, the murders, the home burnings, the schooled in bad schools, bad everything, if you can think about it, paying taxes for something that you didn't get a reward for. So, you know, when our children, we have to look at our children in a different light. I understand that we must see them with a different kind of vision. What is it we want? Who are you? Who are you? Ask the child, who are you? What do you think their response is going to be? I want to, one of the things we were talking about, Wesley can speak to, because when we have some of our mentees come in and we meet them, and Wesley, I know he has met a number of the parents, so they know what the expectations and trying to get a feel for that home life and that kind of thing. So I like Wesley, if you would you talk about the experiences with the family members?
Right. And just like what you were talking about, or Kelly was talking about, excuse me, was you're not only treating treating the mentee, but you're also treating the family. And coming from
Right.
single, and most of those boys coming from single family households, you know, it's it's difficult for that single mother to get some of that point, to get the points across to them. And what Kelly was talking about when you in that aspect, when you're dealing with trauma or things that that they're seeing, one of the things that we have to contend with is getting to the core of trust. In order for us to be able to be effective mentors to those boys, we have to get them to trust us. So the number one thing that we do, on day one, once they come through those doors, we'll have that initial meeting, with the mother and son. But after that, when all those future sessions, they're just dropping them off at the door. Anything that happens within the confines there, we keep it in strict confidence unless it's something where we think they're going to hurt themselves. But we need for those boys to be able to trust us and that what they talk about, stays with us. And that's why we do that. There, and we recognize also there's some boys that we're not going to be able to get through to, and they can't come into the program, and we've had to turn some boys away as a result of it. And just let the mothers know, hey, it's not going to work, because since we primarily mentor in a group format, it's all about chemistry amongst those boys, and you don't want to be bringing someone in that's going to disrupt that mix in a sense. And
Kelly,
so,
do you go to the prison system down there in North Carolina, correct?
I try to do a little work with our sheriff's office, and it's 2 jails in particular that I do work with. But to your question on that, like historically, is people go in and they do work. The conversation that I try to drive things to is, let's have dialogue on post-release. So like 6 months prior to them being released, let's discuss what it's going to look like when they make that transition. Do we got a team that can help them get employed, regardless of what their charges were? And then the connection. So to Brother Webb's point, right? Every kid is not going to fit a particular program. But what I've always identified is that there are resources and allies out there who can serve them. And that's who we direct that mom to, because we can't be a specialist of everything.
right.
But when we teach young people to understand, one, college ain't the only answer.
Right.
The trades is recession proof. You walk into it without no debt, and like when it's hot and that heat go out, people gonna pay money to get that heater fixed, or opposite in the wintertime. And so by using those 2 things and using people like everybody I see up here and the common person in the neighborhood, man, look, about 2 months ago, I wrote a book for the kids. It's called They Lit the Way. So it speaks to the power of the ancestors and the power of the elders, because it's nothing new under the sun. We are just continuing to repeat history. And so explaining and orienting them to that and letting them see that, because the book really for me was about symbology.
Okay.
Right? We see how much that Wakanda did, or Black Panther did, for Black people. It did more than what therapists do.
It sure did. It strengthened so many young Black boys going, I'm Wakanda forever. And I was like, man, how do we ride that wave? Because that was a wave that was, I've never seen a wave that took with Black kids, Black boys, and Black young boys so well was Wakanda, man.
Yeah, and self-love and self-confidence, and everything start with self-confidence. Once I can get you to be confident, you understand that you can accomplish anything. And even to Brother Webb's point, like I redefine even my conversation around mentoring, because mentors help you navigate. in our communities, Black and brown, the Latinos as well, we have to make sure we bring sponsors to the table. Like, I'm gonna help you navigate, but I need to secure you this job or tell you how to get this government contract and vouch for you. That's the real plug and the real connection. And they need to know about their emotions. We got the emotional reaction training right here in the building. I don't know how many books you wrote, but like that brilliance and the stories that comes from every last one of you, like, because they don't know it. And so vicariously, I can avoid my mistakes based on information that you give to me. And so, I mean, I'm just thoroughly humbled and grateful that our conversations, I can relate to them. And I actually orient some of the young people I work with and young adults to this conversation.
I do too. All
because
month.
it's healing.
Yeah. Hey, can I make 2 points? So the first one is that if our history didn't matter, why do people try so hard to eliminate it? You know? Like, and the other thing is, right, we always tell a story starting at slavery. And our history is so much deeper than that.
You're right.
You know? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, when it comes to the mentorship, I really feel like we need to incorporate like mental therapists into those programs, because there's so much trauma that we're not equipped to handle, that we need somebody. You need kids to sit down with therapists and really kind of peel back all those layers of trauma that they experience, you know, because I hear Wes when he talks about there's certain kids you can't like accept into the program, but those are the kids who need to be in that program, but we're just not equipped to deal with that, you know, but we really need that, like, and they really need that.
Hey, Malik, one thing I would say about that, here's just watching therapists, and I got a clinical background, like they stuck in a westernized, a westernized version of what trauma is. And this is where a lot of damage happens. You got educators who got trained in ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences, and the trauma-informed care. But that's like elementary school to real trauma. That should be your building blocks. If you don't have cultural competence,
that's the key.
You cannot relate.
You cannot relate. If you don't have cultural competence, that is the key. I've done that ACEs program. I've been up, and every time I do it, they're talking to white kids. I understand everyone's got, childhood, but when you talk about the kid that, Elder Watkins was talking about, like the third grader talking about, my sister got shot. You know what I mean? That's not in ACEs.
No.
That's not even mentioned.
No.
Hey, look,
I think your point brings great value. I just think
no.
You got elders in the community that understand that healing component better than the therapist.
So my question would be, where's that program? Where's that, therapist that's developed like that program just for that demographic, our community? Because
we got Doc, and we got Doc. Let's create it.
Well, there are therapists out there. They're few. They're not many. And it is few. You're right about that. And I think that's why every time we talk about this inclusion, what are they saying in the job force now? Diversity
and inclusion.
Yeah, it's such, who are they kidding? Right. We have to start back from the childhood trauma, because you cannot create diversity, inclusion if I just don't like you because of what has happened to me.
Right.
Yeah. Like, I also feel like there's an opportunity there.
Yes.
Like, if we're able to develop a curriculum, right, a mentorship curriculum that encompasses all of that, from the leadership skills to history, learning our history, to the mental, health part of it, you could definitely like roll that out across the country, because there's a need for it. right?
Mhm.
So whatever you're doing, Kelly, in like your neighborhood that's successful,
Yeah.
we incorporate that, we franchise that to all these other areas that like there is a tremendous need. I just know like when we were doing it, one, it's very overwhelming, right? So if you're raising your own family, you always trying to find that time when you can, like you take on a mentee and they're like family and they can definitely take over,
Yep.
especially if you like, I know at the time I had young kids and, it could become overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right. And then who's there to like mentor the mentee, the mentor? Because like, you get hit with stuff that you just not equipped to deal
Good
with,
to handle it. That's true.
right?
That's true.
Hey, look, and then Malik, that's the other piece. Because two things. One, the sister Joy DeGrew, right? We ain't even talking about the trauma that the kids experience. We got trauma that's passed down through DNA and through genetics.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
From slavery. And so if it's from slavery, we can re-engineer the trauma to be reversed by providing the healing. And then the other part to that is this. When you talk about the programs, right? And you're listening to the trauma these kids face, well, now you are receiving secondary trauma or vicarious trauma. So we got to make sure you got healing as a provider as well.
Yeah. Because listen, when you hear these stories, right, I'm floored sometimes like, yo, you dealing with that or you dealt with that?
Right.
It's going to a level that is beyond me, so there is a need in our community, right? And like, listen, one of the things that I really like am like sensitive about is there's always like this narrative in our community that we hear over and over and over again. I just watched like Judas and the Messiah.
Oh,
Right? And
how
that
was it?
man, listen, if you
What was
haven't
it?
seen this movie,
I haven't seen
was
it yet.
okay, check out this movie. But there's always this narrative where you see success, right? And you see somebody from within our community, right, work against that success for like the establishment. And I'll just leave it there for the establishment. You hear that narrative all over again, right? How do we change that? And really, long term, not just like on a surface thing or short term, because we've seen that. We've seen like short term success stories, and it's always something that happened.
Well,
Whether it was a charismatic leader and they was corrupt, or they took advantage. Like, we need to change that narrative.
Yeah. So, I mean, but doesn't that go back to black people sold black people into slavery? So that goes back to what Kelly was talking about. A lot of that Judaism or Judaism, if we want to put an ism to it, is it in our DNA? Were we really to sell someone down the river for a profit for myself? God, I hope not. I really hope not. That's not part of. And then how do you find that out when someone comes to you and say, hey, Paul, I'll give you $100 if you tell me something about Malik so I can get to him. And I say, I don't know about 100. I'll give you $1 million. I'm like, okay, Malik does this. He does this. Is that, I mean, so if you have that tendency, like I'm going to say something at a price, someone needs, I don't know how you check that.
So we got to get our own television shows, because part of the problem is the distraction of television, also known as programming. This is not more than psyops.
Right. My brother Kelly, listen, thank you. Listen, there's a deeper conversation to be had. We definitely can't have it today about programming and brainwashing, and it's a lot happening.
We'll talk about brainwashing in March when we come back for Black Coffee Conversation. I just love to talk with my brothers. And I tell you, if I was a young boy, 20 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, I would have loved to have seen this on TV next to the NBA sports.
Right.
I would have went from the Knicks to this type of conversation, so because I thoroughly love and I hope a lot of young people, whoever sees it, watches it and shares and say, man, you got to watch these brothers talk and communicate and listen and conversate, because that's the narrative we are changing here. And like I told you guys before, we were called a racist show. I don't know if you remembered. You saw that in the comment, and I almost commented back. I just was like, whatever. So,
But it working.
Don't buy into
That's
it.
part of that conditioning, though.
yeah,
Exactly.
Hey, you can't fall prey to that. That's part of that conditioning. Now, I'll be honest with you. I don't know how this is gonna come across, but I'm sorry. I'm like so tired of mediocre white men, right? Trying to tell like us what to do and stuff. It's like, yeah. I'm gonna leave it there.
All right.
The brothers, excuse me, but I'm going to have to sign off at the moment.
we're signing off too. Love you
Right.
guys. Have a great
Appreciate it.
Saturday.
Love
Okay.
y'all too.
Bye.
Shout
All
out
right,
to
take
our
care.
therapists because they are.
Yeah, they're out there.
All right.
And they're hustling.
All right. Okay.
Everybody be safe.
Okay.
Y'all be
Bye.
Y'all be
good.
good.